Welcome to your own personal deep dive. Today, we're diving into something a little different, a little gruesome, maybe even a bit controversial. We're talking about the cult classic horror film, Return of the Living Dead.
A classic.
Yeah. You guys sent us a ton of background on this one. We got character bios, major plot points, even some behind-the-scenes trivia. But our mission, if we choose to accept it,
We do.
we always do, is to uncover what makes this movie tick and why it still resonates with fans, decades later.
It's interesting. What's fascinating about this film is how it takes like this familiar horror trope like zombies and it injects it with this punk rock energy and a surprising amount of social commentary.
Right, and we're not talking like the typical slow-moving, flesh-eating ghouls. Like, these zombies are fast, strong, intelligent, and like they are laser-focused on brains. What's the deal with that?
It's such a brilliant move by the filmmakers because instead of just doing a rehash of what Night of the Living Dead established, Return of the Living Dead creates its own distinct mythology. Like these zombies are self-aware, they're even articulate at times, and they're driven by this primal need to consume brains not out of hunger, but to alleviate the pain of decomposition.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine, like you come back from the dead and your reward is agonizing pain?
Yeah.
It adds a whole other layer of tragedy to the horror.
Yeah. It's like a nightmare you can't escape.
Right.
And speaking of nightmares, the source material mentions some pretty interesting real-life inspiration for the zombies' appearance. Something about mummies.
Yeah, the filmmakers drew inspiration from both the Guanajuato mummies in Mexico and the bog bodies of Wales.
Oh, okay. And those Guanajuato mummies, they're the ones with those really grotesque expressions, right?
Exactly. And these real-life examples of preserved corpses, often with these eerily lifelike qualities, add this layer of unsettling realism to the special effects.
Yeah.
You're not just watching a monster movie, you're seeing like echoes of something disturbingly real.
Right.
It's subtle, but really effective way to get under the audience's skin.
Okay, so we've got these like super unique, terrifying zombies, but we haven't even talked about the source of the outbreak. The infamous 2,4,5 trioxin gas. This stuff is like zombie juice on steroids.
It's interesting, and the way that the film links trioxin to Agent Orange, like that real-life chemical used in the Vietnam War with those devastating consequences,
Right.
adds this a chilling layer of social commentary.
Especially with that line about the Darrow Chemical Company developing it for the army to use on marijuana crops.
Right.
Talk about your unintended consequences.
It's a darkly satirical touch. The film is playing on our fears about government experimentation, corporate greed, and the potential for science to be used for destructive purposes. And those are all themes that, unfortunately, I feel like are even more relevant today.
Totally. It's like they ripped that plot point from the headlines. And speaking of things ripped straight from, well, somewhere. Let's talk about trash.
Yeah.
Specifically that unforgettable graveyard scene.
Oh yeah, the striptease, morbid fantasies.
Right.
A classic blend of horror and humor.
But it's not just played for laughs, is it? There's something, like, deeply unsettling about her fascination with death, even before she turns. Like, the film is hinting at this darkness below the surface of, everyday life.
Oh, absolutely. And that darkness is amplified like tenfold when she transforms into one of the living dead. And speaking of transformations, the practical effects in that scene are incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Even by today's standards.
That whole movie, really, is like a testament to the power of practical effects. So much more, like, visceral and unsettling than anything you could do with CGI.
Right.
Seeing real bodies contort and transform. It taps into something primal.
It's that sense of realism, that grounding in something tangible that elevates Return of the Living Dead above your average zombie flick. And speaking of elevating the genre, we got to talk about this soundtrack.
Right. The soundtrack is pure 80s punk rock bliss. It's loud, rebellious. It captures that anarchic spirit of the film perfectly.
Perfectly.
It's like almost a character in and of itself,
So,
adding to that sense of youthful energy and rebellion. And it's interesting how that punk rock ethos also kind of ties into the film's themes of social commentary,
yeah.
Anti-establishment sentiment.
Absolutely. Punk rock was all about challenging authority, questioning norms, giving a voice to the disenfranchised. And Return of the Living Dead kind of does the same thing,
right?
Just with more brains and gore.
With more brains and gore. And sometimes, let's be real, that's just what a good social critique needs. But this wasn't just a one-hit wonder. You sent over some stuff about the Return of the Living Dead franchise,
Yeah.
and it looks like there's a bunch of sequels.
There are, and while they vary in quality, it's really fascinating to see how the franchise expands on and sometimes completely ignores the rules established in that original film. Some try to replicate that unique blend of horror, humor, and social commentary, while others really lean heavily into that campy, over-the-top gore.
Right, right. There's even a note here that the fourth and fifth films were filmed near Chernobyl.
Yeah.
Talk about a bleak backdrop.
It's a bold choice, right? Connecting the fictional horrors of a zombie plague with the very real tragedy of a nuclear disaster. It adds another layer of social commentary to the franchise, I think, forcing us to confront the long-lasting impacts of human actions and our own capacity for destruction.
Right. Which brings us to the ultimate act of destruction in the original film. The military's decision to nuke the entire town to contain the outbreak.
Right.
Let's talk about a scorched earth policy.
It's a chilling reminder that sometimes, the cure can be just as bad as the disease. And it raises all sorts of questions, right? About the use of extreme force, the limits of control, and whether some things are best left undisturbed.
It's a powerful image, that mushroom cloud looming over everything, but even more unsettling is the film's final shot. What do you make of that rain? Carrying those contaminated ashes across the countryside.
It's chilling, isn't it? It suggests that the horror is far from over, that containment is ultimately impossible. And that line from the script about the contaminated soil being stored in railroad cars in South Dakota, talk about a ticking time bomb.
Right.
It leaves the audience with this lingering sense of unease. Sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones we create ourselves.
Like we created a monster.
Right.
But in this case, it's a whole army of brain-hungry zombies. But speaking of monsters, I'm kind of curious about your take on how the film portrays the human characters, especially those, rebellious punk rock kids.
There's such a fascinating contrast to those stereotypical horror movie victims.
Yeah, really.
These aren't helpless teenagers cowering in fear.
Right.
They're armed with switchblades and safety pins and a healthy dose of punk rock defiance.
Right. They're facing down the apocalypse with mohawks and leather jackets. It's almost like the film is saying that, yeah, maybe youthful rebellion isn't the most practical response to a zombie outbreak.
Right.
But it can also be a form of strength. It's about not going down without a fight, even when all hope seems lost.
Precisely. And it's interesting how the film also doesn't shy away from showing the downsides of that rebellious streak. Their punk rock attitude might give them a certain edge, but it also makes them underestimate the threat.
Right.
Which leads to some pretty disastrous consequences.
Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword. Empowering, but maybe a little self-destructive.
Yeah.
And you know what else struck me? The film doesn't just target those rebellious teenagers. It takes aim at authority figures, too. Right?
Right.
The military, the police, they're just as clueless and ineffective as everyone else.
Absolutely. It subverts those traditional figures of authority, portraying them as woefully unprepared and out of touch with the reality of the situation.
It's almost like Return of the Living Dead is saying that blind faith in authority can be just as dangerous as, ignoring the warning signs. Which feels eerily relevant today, don't you think? I mean, we're constantly bombarded with information, misinformation, and conflicting narratives. It's easy to feel like those in charge are either incompetent or actively misleading us. Maybe that's why this film still resonates so much. It taps into that deep-seated fear that sometimes nobody knows what the hell is going on.
Right. And that is the genius of Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
It blends that over-the-top horror with this darkly comedic social commentary to create a film that is as entertaining as it is thought-provoking.
Right.
You walk away, you're laughing one minute, you're questioning everything you know the next. It's a wild ride.
It's the kind of film that really stays with you. It gets in your head. It's kind of well. This has been an awesome deep dive. We went from zombie trivia to social commentary to the finer points of punk rock.
It's been fun.
But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one final brain-tickling thought. What if we took a step back and looked at Return of the Living Dead, not as a horror movie, but as a metaphor?
Ooh, I like where you're going with this.
What if those unstoppable, brain-hungry zombies represent something else entirely, something we all kind of grapple with?
Like what?
Maybe they symbolize our deepest fears, our anxieties, those relentless thoughts that just won't die, no matter how hard you try to bury them.
Oh, wow.
Or what if they represent like the relentless march of time, that inevitability of decay and change that's always looming?
Oh, that's good.
Or maybe, just maybe, they're a reflection of our own insatiable hunger. That need for more, 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 whether it's information or entertainment or, hell, even brains. It seems like we humans are always craving something we can't quite grasp.
That is the beauty of a film like this. It sparks these endless possibilities.
Right.
The intriguing questions, that's what makes it stay with you.
It really does. So, dear listener, as you navigate the world, keep an eye out for those metaphorical zombies.
Ooh, good one.
You never know when they might be lurking around the corner, ready to challenge your assumptions and make you question everything you thought you knew. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the return of the living dead. Sleep tight and don't let the brain-eating ghouls bite.